you worry anymore. Cause when life looks like easy street, there's
Hi everybody, day 16. Yesterday we covered Jackson. We're almost done with him. Today's the last day. What a crazy, crazy life. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think that you could find a lot of criticism about Jackson, and there are a lot of bad things in his past that are extremely regrettable. Indian removal, owning slaves. There's actually there's an ad for, and I've shown you these before. There's an ad for one of his slaves that ran away, that Jackson offers the guy an extra money for every 100 lashes he gives this slave if he's caught, and brings him back. I mean, so there's some things about his life that are appalling. The one thing you cannot argue about is his life was awful interesting. I mean, how many presidents who walk around with a bullet in them, who have someone try to assassinate them and beat the person half to death? I mean, what's the chances of both guns of that guy not going off? To be a national hero, like, it's just an interesting. He's an interesting person. It's an interesting life, for all the flaws that he has. Andrew freaking Jackson's about to go away. We did Indian removal, a huge part of it. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on him and his struggles with the National Bank. It's just not worth it to us. There's not enough there that's really that relevant. The other huge thing with Jackson, I guess two of them. One of the things that Jackson's going to do is Jackson's going to increase the power of the executive of the United States. And to not get too technical with you, he'll be the first president to use the veto as a political weapon, I guess. I mean, Andrew Jackson will veto more bills by Congress than all 6 presidents before him combined. And it didn't bother him. If he didn't want it, you didn't get it. And it's so hard to overturn a veto. But he's going to increase the power of the presidency. He's going to put the presidency on the path to where it is today, where it's way more powerful than it was intended to be. And so that path is going to be started by, of course, Andrew freaking Jackson. I don't think it's hard to believe that he's becoming more powerful. It's like Darth freaking Vader. But that's Andrew Jackson. The other big thing, other than Indian removal, that happened during his presidency is going to be what's known as the nullification crisis. Jackson is going to approve tariffs on imported goods that were supported by Northerners. The Northerners want tariffs. Tariffs protect their business from competition from across the sea. Southerners always oppose tariffs, and one of the things with the Southerners is, they invest in the 2 L's, land and labor, and they're not investing in factories, and so it is actually cheaper for them to get their stuff, their manufactured goods, clothes, and those things. It's cheaper for them to get them from Europe because they don't have the factories in their backyard like the Northerners do. And so this is another divide between what the northern states want and what the southern states want. And we talked earlier in the year, it's a country that's long and not wide at this point, and it's one government and 2 completely different group sets of wants by the people in the north and the people in the south, and that government can't make them both happy. And so you're going to get this crisis over tariffs. Westerners are on both sides of the fence. Southerners are going to call these tariffs abominations, of hateful things. They're seen as a way that the federal government is abusing its power. And the number one person to oppose Andrew Jackson's decision on tariffs is actually the Vice President, John C. Calhoun from South Carolina. And so you have the President signing a bill to put these tariffs in place, and you have the Vice President on the other side of the fence fighting back. John C. Calhoun is the creepy guy that I showed you yesterday. I said you didn't want to wake up with him standing next to your bed. He also looks like the bird from the Muppets. John C. Calhoun is going to make an argument that's going to become a popular argument among a lot of people who oppose this, that the federal government doesn't have the authority to place tariffs. As far as Calhoun is concerned, the states have a right to not follow any law that any law passed by the federal government that they find to be unconstitutional. And so this argument becomes popular. South Carolina and other states are going to say that they don't have to pay this thing, and you're essentially going to get a showdown between the President of the United States and the states of the southern states, South Carolina specifically. South Carolina, by the way, is going to always sort of be a pain in the rear end moving forward. They don't like government, and so they're always sort of seem to be, when trouble comes up, they sort of seem to be in the center of it. But you end up with a nullification crisis. South Carolina decides this tariff is unconstitutional. The federal government doesn't have the power to pass it, and so they're not going to pay it. Obviously, people disagree. Obviously, Andrew Jackson disagrees, and South Carolina, the legislature there will eventually pass a resolution, or two of them, that say that the new tariffs are null and void in their state, and they're not required to pay them. And that now you have a problem, right? You have a federal law that was passed, and you have Andrew Jackson, who is executive of the country, and his job is to enforce the laws. And so he has to make a decision on what he's going to do. It becomes so heated that John C. Calhoun is actually going to quit as vice president. I'm not sure that has ever happened besides this one time in American history, at least that I'm not aware of. He also looks like the guy from Back to the Future, if you've ever seen that movie. And they've drawn a line in the sand. South Carolina says we're not doing it. Andrew Jackson says you are. I don't think personally I'd want to challenge Andrew Jackson. We've seen how that turned out for a bunch of people at this point. But South Carolina does. And so now, Jackson's been challenged on whether or not to enforce the law. I'll remind you that the president enforces the law using the United States military. And South Carolina is going to start to organize and save ammunition and guns, and they're going to start to drill, and they're going to prepare for an invasion of South Carolina by the United States government. South Carolina warns that if this happens, they're going to secede. They're going to pull out and not be part of the United States anymore. I read an interesting quote one time that said South Carolina was too small to be a country, and it was too large to be an insane asylum. But they're going to threaten to leave. And actually, South Carolina is going to threaten to leave during the nullification crisis. And when it comes time, when Lincoln is elected, first state to leave, actually leave the United States or say that it's left the United States, South Carolina. And a lot of that preparation for the day it finally happens in 1860 was done here during the nullification crisis. They had been thinking about it for 35 years or so. Jackson insists he's going to enforce the law. He prepares the United States Army. Long story short, cooler heads prevail. The United States does not invade South Carolina, and South Carolina agrees to pay the taxes, and Congress is going to pass some laws that are going to decrease those tariffs over time. But ultimately, and here's the important part, ultimately this idea that a state can leave has now been put out there and has been put in South Carolinians' heads. And think of it like this: you're in an argument with somebody, and when the argument's over, you go home and you think about it, and you wish, you think to yourself, man, I should have said this, or I should have said that, or I should have pointed this out, or I should have used this argument. South Carolina is going to have 25, 30 years or so, to think this thing over. And when this argument comes up again on whether or not they're allowed to leave, they're going to be prepared and have a pretty good argument ready. So, you know, it's just a side note, it's coming. But they believe that nullification was legal, and they believe secession was legal, and they're going to pull it off eventually. All right, quickly, Van Buren. Martin Van Buren will eventually be vice president after John C. Calhoun resigns. He'll run for the presidency in 1836. He'll win pretty easily because Jackson tells people to vote for him, and no one would not do what he says, or at least a lot of people wouldn't. You're going to get the formation of a new political party in opposition of Jackson's Democrats. They're going to be known as the Whigs. And you're back to your two-party system. You're going to have the Whigs, mostly Northerners, and you're going to have the Democrats, who are mostly Southerners and Westerners. Now, there will be some on each side, but they're predominantly from where they are. And so you have a two-party system again. Van Buren runs, he wins, and then things kind of go sour for him. There's an economic crisis during his presidency. He will only be president for 4 years. He'll take the blame for that, the economic crisis in the United States, the Panic of 1837, there's a Great Depression. He'll take the blame for it, but ultimately the blame really lies with Andrew Jackson, and Andrew Jackson closing and not allowing the Second Bank of the United States to be chartered, and so you get a money shortage and some things. Van Buren will be blamed for it. It's really not his fault, but you know, he's in charge at the time, and so he won't win the next election when he runs for a second term. In 1840, his opponent's going to be William Henry Harrison. The Battle of Tippecanoe and Tecumseh. And I told you plenty of times we love war heroes as presidents. He's going to claim he was a friend of the common people, even though he was born rich. 75% of eligible voters turn out for the election. That number is astronomical. I don't even think we get to 50% nowadays. 75% is an astronomical number of people voting, and William Henry Harrison is going to win. The popular vote was close, but it's a landslide in the Electoral College. And same thing, William Henry Harrison, we don't spend a whole lot of time because not a ton of things happen between his presidency and Van Buren's presidency, and we're really kind of worried more about big ideas than everything else. Okay, I tried to keep that as quick as I could. Tomorrow I'm going to have something for you to do. You won't be watching me, and then we're going to move into slavery on Thursday and Friday, which I think that you'll enjoy a little bit. See you then.
In the first days are the hardest days, don't you worry anymore. 'Cause when life looks like easy street, there's danger at your door.